She is my partner this summer.
Okay, so welcome. I'm going to use this microphone so that I know you all can hear me fine, but so people joining us remotely can hear as well. Hello, I'm Hillary Richardson. I'm the coordinator of undergraduate research. I'm so glad you all joined us to celebrate the hard work of our students who are going to introduce themselves in just a minute and briefly talk about what they learned over the span of their intensive summer work. And then what they will do beyond that. There are desserts over here and fruit if you'd like to, or a drink if you'd like to get some for those joining us home. If you want to bring your own snacks, we will happily share. Excellent. I see Dr. Hedda has his Taco Bell. That's great. So yeah, again, thank you all. We're going to pause after the brief presentations for a little Q&A. So if you have a question out here, obviously you just raise your hand and somebody will pass you the microphone. And if you have a question, maybe I should come up here so you all can see better who's talking to you. But if you have a question via Zoom, if you could raise your hand or type in the chat, we'll relay the question or I'll unmute you or something. So do we have a volunteer for one of our students to go first? Okay, excellent. All right.
So my name is Michaela Reed. I'm a Columbus native and a senior here at MUW. My major is psychology, and I'm hoping to get my master's degree in social work and certified in animal-assisted therapy. So what Dr. Brooks and I have been working on over the past 5 weeks is uncovering the intrinsic and extrinsic motivators that are associated with consumer preference in payment services. So essentially, we've been designing this literature review that is identifying and defining these different factors that consumers, college students, young adults may take into consideration when choosing to use services like alternative financial services, mobile payment services versus your traditional banking systems. So our theoretical framework consists of a model that was provided by the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which basically states that financial knowledge contributes to financial behavior, which then in turn affects financial situation and financial well-being. So hopefully, after completing this 5 weeks, this literature review will help us conduct our survey in the fall, and we'll be able to figure out if some of these motivators that we've defined actually come to fruition, or if there's other motivators that we hadn't quite considered yet. So,
Thank you. All right. I'd like to talk next. Volunteers. Saralynn, excellent. Let me go under my chair. Okay, I can, but I don't know which way to face. I'll just turn slowly. Okay. Okay.
Okay, so hi everyone. My name is Saralynn Slot, and I'm going to be a senior this year at MUW. I'm a pre-med major, so I'm a biology major in the biology department, and I just applied to medical school, which is super exciting. So hopefully I'll be there after this year. But as a pre-med major, I knew I wanted to do something with medicine for research. I knew I wanted to be involved with research, and I knew I wanted to focus on medicine, especially since a lot of the classes I had taken didn't really focus on medicine. So I was really looking to get into that and make sure, this is what I wanted to do with my life. So thankfully, Dr. Hedda has a research lab where he works on researching cystic fibrosis, which is an autosomal recessive disease. So I was able to work with Dr. Hedda this summer, and I learned that with science research, unlike other research, you kind of have to make a plan and just go for it. And you don't know until the very end if it worked or not, because you can't really adjust or shift as you go. You just have to be headstrong and just work towards it. So our goal was for me to learn a bunch of different skills so that when I come back in the fall and the spring, I can carry out my own independent research. So a few of the skills that I really focused on, especially at the beginning, was Western blotting and SDS pages, which is just a technique to look at different proteins, specifically the CFTR protein, which is the protein that when it mutates causes cystic fibrosis, that genetic disease. So I did that the first half of the summer. And then we took a turn and I really focused on tissue culturing or like cell culturing. So in the lab, we have a mutated line of bronchoepithelial cells, which is just a fancy term for the cells that line your lungs. And so we got to take those out and put those in an incubator. And I got to learn how to wash the cells, how to feed the cells, how to monitor their growth and make sure that they were properly growing like they were supposed to. So I learned so much in doing that, so much about the equipment, so much about how to know under a microscope whether your cells are healthy or not. So that was really awesome. And then for the very last part of the summer, we focused on a technique called immunofluorescent cytochemistry, which is a fancy way of saying that you can take cells and place them on a slide under a microscope. And then we have these special chemicals we can put over them that kind of like pokes little holes in the top of the cells. Then you can put antibodies on the cells and then secondary antibodies to bind to those first antibodies. And when it's all said and done, you can look under a microscope and fluorescently tag proteins that you want to study. So in doing all this, when we start in the fall, the very first thing I'm going to do first week of school is take out some cells that are frozen and do the tissue culture. And then once those cells have grown to where I can count them and start to measure them, we have 5 reagents that were sent to Dr. Hedda from India that we're going to take and place over these cells. And then we're going to measure their growth and see if they actually help the CFTR protein expression or what effect they have on those. So that's what I'm going to be studying in the end. But this summer, it just took a lot of work to get there, and it took a lot of work to learn all the techniques. So, but that's what I'm looking forward to. And I'm really thankful for Ms. Richardson and Dr. Hedda for helping me this summer and all that I've learned. And especially as a pre-med student, getting to do something that involves medicine was super exciting. So thank y'all.
Saralynn, do you want to turn it over to Z? Yes. Can you tell her?
I can hear you. Oh, can you hear me? Can you hear me well? I'm not sure.
Yes. Z.
Can they hear me? Okay. Okay. So along with Saralynn, I've been working with the CFTR protein as well. She basically covered a lot of what we were both working on. But basically, a lot of what I focused on during the summer research was the endogenous expression of the CFTR protein. And basically, we had already found some results in the previous semesters and that they were showing good results. And basically, me and Dr. Hedda were just finishing up some touches, working on the details, trying to really get a good image or picture for a conference that I'm going to be going this August and presenting this research as well that I've worked on during the summer. But a lot of the techniques and stuff I had learned in the previous summer as well. But I've learned like immunofluorescent cytochemistry. I've been working with that during the summer, and I've just been learning how to do that too. And hopefully I'll be able to get some hands-on with that as well, even though I know it'll be mostly of Saralynn's work. But I'll be, again, doing Western blotting during the fall and working with the 5 reagents that Saralynn was mentioning, hoping we can see how it affects the CFTR expression protein as well.
Thanks, Z and Saralynn. With 2 left, let's connect.
Yes, it is working. Hi, my name is Amy Aswell. I guess the easiest thing to say would be a senior. I'm in the music therapy equivalency program here. I'm starting my 2nd year with that. I'm also minoring in philosophy. So my project this summer was about trying to discover ways that I can take the concepts of phenomenology, which is the branch of philosophy that it studies how we understand perception and how the world around us affects how we perceive things, and how our experiences also affect how we perceive the world around us, and how I can use that as a music therapist in a better informed treatment plan for patients that have trauma-related disorders. So I started off the summer looking through literature reviews of music therapy papers and techniques for working with patients with trauma. And I also was investigating phenomenology itself and trying to figure out basically what that is and how that can be applied to psychology and how that can be applied to medicine as well, because it's a branch of philosophy by itself. And so most of the summer I felt like I was working on two different projects and trying to link the two together. But I discovered basically how that ties in. I found lots of articles about dealing with phenomenology and trauma and having that centered perspective on dealing with the patient, and also more information about music and trauma and music therapy and trauma. And I'm finding gaps in research, especially dealing with children and trauma and dealing with PTSD and trauma-related disorders that don't have a military etiology. And I like to find out more about that as I continue my research, and I try to tie the two together. So right now I'm looking back at some of the master texts from the philosophers Heidegger, Merleau-Ponty, in their own words, and trying to figure out exactly what their views are and how I can apply them in my chosen profession as a music therapist.
All right, hey, round us up. Round us off.
All right, hi guys, I'm Maggie. I'm a senior history major, and I have a concentration in public history and a minor in art history. And this second summer term, I worked with Dr. Kempker doing research for Pilgrimage, and I studied Hamilton Hall and the Whitfield family. So you're going to have to stick with me for a second because the story gets a little bit convoluted. So the traditional pilgrimage story that's always told is that the Whitfield family built Hamilton Hall as a wedding present for Henry B. Whitfield and Laura Young. And they sold the house to a man named Marcellus Hatch in 1867. And then from there, the main point of the pilgrimage story has always been that Hatch lost the house in a poker game. Except that what I've found in my research is that that's not even the most interesting part of the story. So the first thing I found was that the Whitfield family had nothing to do with the building of the house at all. It was actually the Young family that constructed the house as Laura's private estate. So it shouldn't. And so from there, it was to ensure that under married women's property rights in Mississippi, that Laura and her children would always have money in their estate. Even if Henry messed up, if his business went south, that they would always have a financial future. But what ended up happening is that Laura's parents died in about 1863. And because of the Civil War, probate cases took a really long time to go through. And so inheritance packages were messed up. And so legal cases took forever. And so Henry took this opportunity and essentially took over her inheritance. He took over her portion of her father's plantation, built a mill that went south, it didn't produce any kind of money. He mortgaged the mill, couldn't pay the debt, so he mortgaged their house without Laura's knowledge to pay off the debt from his property. And so he got himself into this hole, so he ended up selling the house without telling Laura. And if we remember, the house was not his personal property. And so Laura, using this married women's property rights law, sued her husband for the cost of the estate and the cost of the house. But unfortunately, the courts ruled that because Marcellus Hatch was not implicit in the fraud, he got to keep the house, but Henry would owe Laura money and become part of her estate. So he'd be a trustee within her household. And so from there, it's just a story of money mismanagement over and over and over again. And so this project has gone a little bit beyond pilgrimage. It'll become my senior capstone, and it'll be about married women's property rights and like property law and its effects on women's rights in the South.
Maggie, if you all could unmute yourselves and, unmute your own selves here too, and give these students a round of applause. And I just want to reiterate, I don't know if you could hear it, but I felt like I could hear each one of these students kind of light up when they talked about their project. And so that to me says that this program, if nothing else, ignited a spark that will continue on. And just to reiterate again, these students have an academic year to continue doing this research, and they're going to be asked to present at a conference of their choosing, either an external one or our very own undergraduate research conference. So look for more accomplishments from these students. But now is a good time to take any questions that anybody might have about their experiences, about something that they learned, about what they plan to keep doing. If you want to clarify something that they talked about, or if you just want to know more about the program, now would be a good time to ask questions. So I'll give it over to the floor. If you raise your hand, I'll pass you the microphone.
Hillary, I have a question. Perhaps you can just ask Z. It's a very simple question.
Okay.
What conference is she going to, and what will she be presenting? She mentioned the conference in August.
For Z. Z, did you hear that?
Yes. Hi, Dr. Whitehead. I'll be going to a conference in Biloxi. It's the abbreviation for it is MAS, and it's a scientific conference. And I'll be presenting the project that I was basically working on in the summer with Dr. Hedda, and the title of it is the endogenous CFTR expression in human pancreatic cell lines. So basically seeing if we can find, basically showing that we did see the CFTR protein in our Western blotting, and that this can be used for future CF diagnosis patients. If that answered her question.
Thank you, Z.
MAS, by the way, stand for Mississippi Academy of Sciences. This is the annual gathering. Usually they meet every year in the month of February, but because of pandemic, the whole schedule is messed up. So they are meeting this time in August, which is pretty odd. So before the semester begins, they are going to meet in August. But again, from starting next year, 2022, they are going to be back on schedule. That is in the February of 22.
Thank you, Dr. Hedda. The Dean of the Library, Amanda Powers, has a question. She'd love to know more about what the students learned from the experience of doing original research this summer, and would also love to hear the titles of each of the projects. And for those of you who are joining us, well, I guess in person and virtually, once we break for mingling, I will post everybody's project along with titles and things on the slides. But go ahead, and if you want to talk about your experiences and say the title of your project as well, I can pass it around again. You want to go in the same order? Volunteer basis?
I can start since I feel like the only one on Zoom. I can.
All right, Z, let's hear it.
Well, the title of my project is the endogenous CFTR expression in human pancreatic cells. And my experience so far has been I really enjoyed it because I had been working, as I said, in the previous semesters during the school year, but just not having that pressure of being like in an actual class and being to like really work on my research like all the time. It was really, I enjoyed it. It was just like a pressure that was not on me with school, but rather just like all heady and into the research and being able to concentrate it on it and like go into lab I really enjoyed it. And from the experiences of like learning new techniques and overall has been really great. And thank you to Dr. Hitta and Ms. Richardson for allowing me that opportunity as well.
It gave me an opportunity to actually do research in the local, in the Phillips Garth archives in the local library, and it gave me a chance to use the indexes and go through the files, and it gave me like actual working opportunity to go through and deduce my own research. But my working title for my project is Hamilton Hall and the Whitfield family. That's about it. I haven't really figured it out yet.
So just for some clarification, I haven't actually started my project yet. I was just training this summer, but the title of my project is looking at the CFTR expression with known chloride ion channel activators. And those are the 5 reagents that me and Z were talking about. So I haven't actually started that yet. I'll start that first thing in the fall. But this summer I did learn a lot. I guess the most important thing is all the techniques I learned that I have to apply in the fall and the spring. But also I learned about how much dedication is required for independent research, and it is a lot of work, but it's very rewarding when you get to the end and you see all that you've accomplished, because I never imagined that I could have done all that in just one summer. So I'm very thankful, and I learned a lot, and I'm excited in the future, especially like in medical school, to do research. And I feel like I learned so much that I can apply there. So
I feel like
There we go. I feel like I had an interesting experience just because what I was researching feels like a kind of niche subject. There isn't much information about phenomenology as it's necessarily applied to music, and especially if I've found applied to music therapy. So the core of my research this summer has been trying to synthesize from what I know about music therapy and understand about it already into what I'm learning about phenomenology and how that applies to psychotherapy as well. So it's been a lot of, like I mentioned earlier, just trying to pull what feels like 2 different projects together. And it's shown me really what I feel like I understand about music therapy so far and what I still have room to grow on. And also it's given me a chance to read some of the original texts from some of the phenomenological philosophers who I had never heard of before. So that's been a really neat opportunity for me. And I'm not sure that I mentioned this earlier, so I'll mention it now. I am turning my project into a paper and eventually into 2 papers, one of which will be used for undergraduate research conference. And the other will be hopefully submitted for publication in a philosophy journal.
So the title of my research project is the intrinsic and extrinsic factors that are associated with consumer preference in payment services. So essentially, we're looking at how college students and young adults utilize these factors to contribute to which payment service they're going to go with. Something that I've learned over the course of the last 5 weeks is there is a lot of research out there. I logged so many hours just scanning through our library database, trying to find information that I could utilize in my paper. And what I've also found is that sometimes you have to take the resources that you have and that you find and kind of manipulate them to fit what you're after, so what your question is. But thankfully, with our library staff and with Dr. Brooks, I've been able to have the resources and assistance to be able to get through my paper and get ready for the fall semester when we do our survey. So.
Are there any other questions from anybody here or anybody online? Yes, Dr. Oppenheimer.
So you guys have to present either here or at some other conference. And how do they get to some other conference? Are there travel funds for you guys to travel to some outside conference, like the MAS conference down in Biloxi in August?
So there are, as far as the Office of Undergraduate Research goes, there are not currently funds for that, but if anybody in the audience, virtually or in person, wants to know more about supporting that program, we are trying to raise money for that. And also, I think that there are some funds within departments that students are able to use for things like that. And I know that there are funds for honors college students as well. But one of my goals for the next year is to fund individual research. Right now, these students get paid for their tuition, their housing, and their meals, but that's kind of where it ends. And so I'd like to be able to offer them beyond that, support for that kind of thing. Yeah. Did that answer your question? Anybody else have anything to add? Dr. Anderson has something to add.
Yeah, the College of Arts and Sciences should have some money to support student travel to conferences. We've done it in the past, and it's a foundation fund, which hopefully will be available for this coming year. And last year, even though the pandemic, we still were able to support some students' travel. Toward the end of this year, there are opportunities. So I encourage all students, you and students to please talk with your advisor. It has to come through the chain of command. It has to be an academic project done at MUW that is relevant to your major. And just work with your advisor and department chair, and it'll come up through me, and hopefully we'll have funds to support your travel.
Dr. Anderson,
Yes.
Any travel support to the faculty?
That fund I mentioned is just for students. It's called the President's Student Fund.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? I see a couple of hands raised. Dr. Hedda, did you have a question, or was that from earlier, from just
Yeah,
now?
this is from earlier, sorry.
Okay. And we have a question from Nancy Ellis. Nancy, would you like to unmute yourself? Oh, you have already. Go ahead.
I can see Maggie just squirming right there. This is her grandmother. And I want to say I'm proud of her and of all of you young ladies. And I appreciate the university doing this for you. But I can tell you that something came alive in Maggie when she was handling those primary documents. And that was a delightful thing to have her share that with me. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ellis. We have some hearts reacting from your comment.
But she did that big golden girl.
Oh, and an alum. Excellent. Wonderful.
A very proud alum.
Wonderful. Any other questions or comments? Things that make us have heart reactions? Excellent. Okay, well, I'm going to leave the Zoom running. So if you do have a question, this is sort of the end of the presentation mode, but I'm going to leave the Zoom running, and we're going to let people mingle and enjoy some dessert and conversation. But stick around if you'd like to, virtually and or in person. Thanks again. Let's give them one more round of applause. Enjoy. Thank you for coming if you are heading out, but feel free to grab a cupcake. Look at how many